What is the most unusual Bible verse? Song of Songs 4:5. Your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, I have a message from God for you. As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh and plunged it into the king's belly. 22 Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Judges chapter 3:20. Ezekiel chapter 16:26. You engaged in prostitution with the Egyptians, your neighbors with large genitals, and aroused my anger with your increasing promiscuity. The story this verse is a part of fits well with the whole biblical narrative. But why that extra detail about the Egyptians? I dunno if it's the most unusual, but I always like the fact that Numbers 12:3, written by Moses, says, Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. My fave is the very end of Jonah. Jonah is in the desert but found a tiny tree with a gourd to give him shade. After a bit, the gourd shriveled and dies, and Jonah must suffer in the sun again. Jonah cusses out the gourd. Right then God came down to Jonah and chastised him good. Jonah, that gourd existed by no labor of your own. Judges chapter 15:16 And he found a new jawbone of an ass, and put forth his hand, and took it, and slew 1,000 men therewith. TLDR God had a man bury underwear and then retrieve it after a long time to prove a point. Genesis chapter 27:11 is my favorite. My brother Esau is a hairy man, but I am a smooth man. If two men are fighting and the wife of one of them comes to rescue her husband from his assailant, and she reaches out and seizes him by his private parts, 12 You shall cut off her hand, show her no pity. Deut. 25:11-12. The king desireth not any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines. I have always been partial to Jeremiah 10:5. Like a scarecrow in a cucumber field. Their idols cannot speak, they must be carried because they cannot walk. Do not fear them, they can do no harm nor can they do any good. I love the comparison to scarecrows in a field, but specifically a cucumber field. How random. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes. Yes, I know this translation is debatable. As is often the case with rare words in the Bible. It has been a few years, but I studied biblical Hebrew in college. The phrase in question is toh mer miq-. The second word is translated as cucumber field in the Brown Driver Briggs, which is the authoritative lexicon for biblical scholars. The same term is used in Isaiah chapter 1:8 and Baruch 6:70. The first word is translated here as scarecrow, but is sometimes translated as palm tree, or post, like in Judah 4:5. He that blesseth his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to him. Proverbs chapter 27:14. He said to Jacob, Let me eat some of that red stuff, because I'm exhausted. Genesis chapter 25:30. Something about the way this is worded makes it seem strange. Ecclesiastes chapter 10:19. A feast is made for laughter. Wine makes life merry, and money is the answer for everything. My personal favorite is Song of Solomon chapter 5:4. Web translation is, My beloved thrust his hand in through the latch opening. My heart pounded for him. Which already sounds kinky AF. But I particularly like how the KJV describes this butterflies in the stomach feeling. My beloved put his hand by the hole of the door, and my bowels were moved for him. He turned around, looked at them and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. This one is weird even with context. Turns out, it's just a prank. Bro, was frowned upon even in the days of the Bible. Proverbs chapter 26:18-19, New International Version. No one whose testicles are crushed or whose male organ is cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. Deuteronomy chapter 23:1. If a man beats his male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies as a direct result, he must be punished. But he is not to be punished if the slave gets up after a day or two, since the slave is his property. Exodus chapter 21:20-21. She lusted after her lovers, whose genitals were like those of donkeys and whose emission was like that of horses. Ezekiel 23:20 NIV. Not a verse, but an excerpt from 1 Kings chapter 3. 16-28. Solomon makes a difficult decision. They argued back and forth in front of Solomon. Until finally he said, "Both of you say this live baby is yours. Someone bring me a sword." A sword was brought, and Solomon ordered, "Cut the baby in half. That way each of you can have part of him. Please don't kill my son." The baby's mother screamed, "Your Majesty, I love him very much. But give him to her. Just don't kill him." The other woman shouted, "Go ahead and cut him in half. Then neither of us will have the baby." Solomon said, "Don't kill the baby." Then he pointed to the first woman. "She is his real mother. Give the baby to her." Everyone in Israel was amazed when they heard how Solomon had made his decision. They realized that God had given him wisdom to judge fairly. Here's John Mulaney's dissection of that. Judges chapter 4. Barak routs Sisera's army and sends him fleeing for his life to the tent of Eber. Trusting in an alliance they had. Yael, Eber's wife, invites Sisera in and encourages him to lie down and rest. But Yael, Eber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep. Exhausted, she drove the peg through his temple into the ground. And he died. Judges chapter 4, 21. One of the most metal verses in the Bible. Mark 14, 4650. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Many verses. But I love them. Leviticus chapter 15, 19. When a woman has her regular flow of blood, the impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days. And anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. 20. Anything she lies on during her period will be unclean. And anything she sits on will be unclean. 21. Whoever touches her bed must wash his clothes and bathe with water. And he will be unclean till evening. 22. Whoever touches anything she sits on must wash his clothes and bathe with water. And he will be unclean till evening. 23. Whether it is the bed or anything she was sitting on, when anyone touches it, he will be unclean till evening. 24. If a man lies with her and her monthly flow touches him, he will be unclean for 7 days, any bed he lies on will be unclean, and on until. 29. On the 8th day she must take 2 doves or 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting. 30. The priest is to sacrifice one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. In this way he will make atonement for her before the Lord for the uncleanness of her discharge. Edit. And those crying about childbirth and missing verses. Calm down. The post was asking for crazy Bible verses. And 29 and 30 fit on their own merit. Proverbs chapter 25, 16. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Sure, it's practical advice. But one Sunday it was the verse of the day for our Sunday school lesson. Given all the verses available in the Bible, it seemed like a strange choice. Song of Songs, 7-8. 7. Your stature is like that of the palm, and your breasts like clusters of fruit. 8. I said, I will climb the palm tree, I will take hold of its fruit. May your breasts be like clusters of grapes on the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples. Unusual. Lee Badass. Biblical Assassin's Creed. He's left-handed too. Judges chapter 3, 15-23. Again the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, the son of Jerah the Benjamite. The Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon king of Moab. Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long, which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. He presented the tribute to Eglon king of Moab, who was a very fat man. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. But on reaching the stone images near Gilgal he himself went back to Eglon and said, Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you. The king said to his attendants, Leave us. And they all left. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace. See, and said, I have a message from God for you. As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch, he shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. Literally anything from the Hawaiian Pidgin interpretation. If you have the Bible app, change your language to Hawaiian Pidgin. Here's a few of my favorites. All da time you gotta go all out fo be good. Jalike yoa fada in da sky. He every time go all out fo be good. Matthew chapter 5, 48 HPB. So Satan go by him and pressure him. He tell Jesus, So, what? You God boy fo real kind? Den tell dese rocks hea fo come food. Matthew chapter 4, 3 HPB. If somebody make sex with one animal jalike as one wahini. You guys gotta kill da guy and da animal. Prizes 20. 15 HPB. Give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish. And wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let he who is in poverty drink. And remember his misery no more. Proverbs chapter 31. 6-7. This is not sound medical advice.